I was at a concert last night with my family, my teenage kids, my wife, 21 Pilots. They was very good. They did such a great job. Just two guys on stage, and they had that whole arena with them the entire time. Just very well orchestrated, well played. They're from Ohio, these two guys. I'm also from Ohio, and I don't know if the Ohio thing has me thinking about that, but what I've been thinking about is how somebody's life goes in that direction, that they have devoted themselves to music and to creating these environments where people can have a good time and enjoy the music and all of that. And it's just so fascinating how people become what they become. And I wonder if you've thought about that for yourself. I mean, so few of us are going to become what these guys are, which isn't even necessary. We don't need that many of people to do that kind of thing. But we do need to know how to live life. And for that, the role of stories of life is indispensable. And the typical word for that is a biography. Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I am Michael Stewart Robb, better known as Mike. Yeah, we do books, everyday spirituality here today. A little bit of a books and everydayness coming together in the form of reading biographies. I don't read a lot of biographies. I read some biographies. I think it is important to not only read those kinds of books that you're really good at reading, but to diversify some. And there are some genres I admit I really don't read in. I may talk about those at some point in the future, but I do read biographies, and I think it is important for you to read biographies too. At least in a broad sense. Here's what I mean. We all need stories of life, and we all have gotten them in one way or another. Everybody got them from their family of origin, from their mama and their papa, their grandparents, whoever raised us, told us about life. They told us about their life, perhaps, or about the lives of other people. These are the stories that we pick up just around the table. People just say what happened to them. And from these stories, we learn how we ought to or could live our lives. Now, sometimes these come in a little bit more polished form in, say, a film kind of presentation or a television streaming kind of thing, maybe a podcast, maybe a short piece of writing. Maybe it's a story in a largely nonfiction book, but there's a life story in there. These pieces come to us in various ways, and they're extremely important because they help us find orientation in life. They help us figure out who we are, where we're going, where we could be going, and the sorts of things that might need to happen to us or that we might need to do in order to get there. That's the orientation. It's like maps. In order to get from A to B, you've got to look at some maps. Except these life stories come to us. It's like different maps have to be pieced together in order to figure out how our particular journey ought to go. There's also the moral side, the need to have role models, and these stories, and I am talking about biographies, by the way, still. These stories give us people that we should or ought to or could be like. Right? The role of a role model is to set somebody before us who we should could emulate. At the same time, there are also anti-role models. So stories of people who we shouldn't emulate. The problem is that these little pieces that come to us from our families or from things we're reading, things we're listening to, they very often are limited. Like I said, we piece them together and kind of try to create a coherent sense of what life is about. But very often, say for example, our family of origin may not have contained anybody whose particular life calling is similar to our own. I mean, I'll just say for myself, the thing that I have been called to do with my life is very different from what most of my ancestors have done. Therefore, we need to find ways to get life stories from people who we possibly aren't just going to meet by being with our friends and family. We need to go specifically for those life stories that fit what God has called us to do. And that's what I guess I do is this kind of vocational biography reading where most all of the biographies that I have read have had a loose connection to the kind of life that I read, the kind of life that I lead, not read. And so I am kind of a thinker, theologian, philosopher kind of person. I live cross-culturally. I have an interest in teaching others about everyday spirituality and books, and therefore I read a number of biographies about people who have done that kind of thing. I mean, years ago, at least 10 years ago, I read this rather thick one on Jonathan Edwards, and it was helpful. I mean, there are certainly ways in which Edwards' life is very different from mine, and sometimes there's a kind of historical interest in that for me. At other times, it's good to just know, okay, don't do that. Another one, Dallas Willard. This is the only biography about him written by Gary Moon, and in part by me. If you open the title page, you'll see my name on there. That's not the title page. It's in there somewhere. I was involved in really trying to figure out Dallas Willard's life because I knew we needed a biography about him, and I knew that I needed to know about his life because my life was going in very, very similar directions. Another limitation of these stories that we just pick up from here and there and from our family and all of that is that they leave out the whole scope of life. They pick the high points, the times when the most exciting things are happening to a person, the most life-changing or world-changing and all of that, and we miss the womb to tomb, the birth to death perspective, which is very important because most of our life is not going to be lived in those highlight moments, in those momentous moments. And there are two things about that perspective, birth to death, that are rather important. One is it helps us to see that there are stages to life, that there's childhood and adulthood and all that. Our life is going to be moving through these stages, and we're going to only be probably in one stage at a time. Maybe we're between stages, but it helps us to get perspective that there are other things that are coming, or to get clarity on what's already happened and what we've already moved through. And that's one of the things that a biography can do for us. It's like we're on a conveyor belt and things are moving forward, and we should responsibly move forward with life. The other thing about that whole perspective that a biography can give us is that it shows us that life has various turns, and most people, they're going along in a certain direction, and then things happen and their life takes a direction which they didn't expect it would take. or they make a decision, and that leads to other kinds of things. So our lives are like zigzags. Therefore, when you see that in the biographies, you can realize, oh, when that happens to me, okay, that's just what happens in life. See, one of the things that these birth to death biographies can help us with is to enter the ordinary, embrace the ordinary of our own lives, because our own story is not largely going to be lived in these highlight moments, the dramatic times, major changes. It's mainly going to be about the ordinary things that we do and about doing them well. And that's one of the things that a good biography can do, is that it won't just present the sort of dramatic, it will present the behind the scenes stuff, the things that made a person who they are, as well as just what they did every day. And I think that is important to get us out of this life lived on stage, Instagram kind of life that currently is so prevalent. As we all know, so many of these Instagram lives, TikTok lives, YouTube lives aren't real. The person is just performing for the camera. They're just trying to sell a product or something like that. But even if they are real, they leave out so much of a person's life. They don't show the nitty gritty, what they really do in the morning, what they did when they were younger, what they will do when they're older. And that is precisely what a well-researched biography, especially this Edwards biography, this is so well done by George Marsden. That's what that can really do for us. And it reminds me of a scripture verse which I think I've preached on. So teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. And that's what a biography can do for you. It can help you figure out what your days could be like, what the span of a human life is. And therefore, by looking at what other people have done, gain wisdom from them in order to live your life well. And I really hope that for all of you, that you will gain a heart of wisdom, whether you do it by reading biographies or not, but it's going to be essential for life in a way that so many of the other pursuits in life are not. Well, I'll see you next time. Bye.